The tabs element from Clutch Elements library is perfect when you're building websites where you have lots of content that you want to be able to break up and display via tabs. The tabs element is fully stylable and is minimally styled to at least get you started from a good base point, giving you states like active and inactive states for you to style your individual tabs. And since each individual tab is fully stylable, you have the ability to create an array of different possibilities when working with tabs. The tabs element is also fully accessible and keyboard navigable, allowing your users to be able to use screen readers and their keyboard to be able to switch between the content of the different tabs. In this video, I'll be going through and discussing how you can configure tabs and also how to style each individual tab and set tabs with URL parameters. This is great for whenever you're wanting to be able to build a set of tabs that are clickable and apply state that allows you to then share a web page with somebody else that will open that page and also open the tab to the current selected tab that a user had picked before they had copied that URL or shared that URL with somebody. So let's go ahead and dive into how to configure tabs from tabs. First things first, we'll insert a tabs component from the library. Actually, I'm going to just search for tabs and we'll add our tabs to our canvas. So the tabs element by itself is made up of several different parts. So we have the root tabs component that houses all of the individual parts that make up the tabs. So we have a tabs list, and this tabs list contains each of our tabs trigger that allows you to click and then change the content that is shown. And then the individual tabs content for each tab that is available. Tabs can be edited directly on the canvas. So we'll say hello, or we'll make this more real and we'll make this something like features. And the second one will be perks. Last one would be, I'm trying to think of something as far as like maybe a listing goes, parking. Yeah, so now we have a set of tabs that kind of work for maybe a listing of some sort that would show different features of a listing, some of the perks like living there, etc. Can't think of any examples off the top of my head, so I'm just rambling at this point. And then as far as the tab's content goes, each tab's content is tied directly with the trigger in order. So the first trigger goes with the first content, second trigger goes with the second content, third trigger with the third content, and so on and so forth. So if we want to edit the first content, we would just edit that directly on the canvas. And now we have a way to edit the content. Somehow got double text there. There we go. And so that's how you that's how you configure just the trigger and then the content itself. We know that the tabs triggers are tied to in order of first with first. If you wanted to change how that works, so you wanted to explicitly have this tabs trigger open the third content or however you want to set it up, or if you want a little bit more granular control, you can come through and set a custom value here of 1 and add another value for the content of 1. And then that way they'll be tied together in that way. And then this way you always have a reference of how to work with the tabs as such and in this way. The other ways that you might want to configure your tabs is that you want to have a tab whenever you open a page or that page finally does load, you want your tabs to load a default value. So in this case, I want the third tab when somebody navigates to a page and they land on this page with tabs, the third tab will be open by default. Finally, let's go over the activation mode. Activation mode works with keyboard navigation. So instead of each tab individually becoming active whenever I use keyboard navigation, so as I switch between these, the content is immediately shown. You can switch up the functionality of how that works. And if we switch this to a manual activation, then whenever I go into keyboard navigation, looks like I need a refresh again, just for that new update of the property to take place. So now whenever I go through and I keyboard navigate into these, I now have to hit enter for that content to be shown. So that's the activation mode. And finally, the third property that is going to come back into play in the third chapter of this video is this on value change. When the value of the tabs changes, so whenever I make a click and we show a different tab here, this on value change would fire some type of action to perform or do something. You could tie analytics to this. You could do a number of things, but like in this example that I'll show later on, we'll be using that on value change to modify some URL params to always keep the URL in sync with the current active state of the tabs themselves. So that's everything as far as configuring a set of tabs. Let's learn how tabs can be styled. So tabs themselves can be styled individually. Each individual part of the tabs are stylable, is essentially what I'm trying to say. So if we wanted to style the tabs triggers, so in this case, by default, our tab triggers are highlighted in black when they're active, and they have this little gray background when they're inactive. So we can go through and we can style the inactive version of our tabs, and with that inactive state set here on the tabs trigger, I can go through and apply, a new background color. We'll use something a little bit more fun, a little more colorful. So we'll use this dark green. And then whenever I click over, the tab is now dark green. One other thing that we might want to do, since this is so dark, is change the typography here, and we'll give this a white typography. All right. And so now the inactive state is green and the active state is black. We can go through and style the active state. We'll give the active state a background color of amber. We'll give it a darker amber color. And so we now have a tab that is green when it's inactive and this amber color when it is active. We can then take those styles that we created on this individual instance of the tab and share that with the other tabs by creating a class. So we'll convert this into a class, and that created a class for us called tabs trigger 3. And the class itself can then be shared with the other tabs that I have in this component. So I'm going to copy this class, and I can go through, you could go through and individually type in and search for the tabs trigger 3. Here we can see I was messing around earlier today. So that's why I have this third instance, or this third class that was automatically generated. I'll pick that third one, and it gets applied by searching for it in the class window. You can also copy a class directly, and you can just select the next tabs trigger and then using Shift Command V, it will automatically add that tabs trigger 3 right to the tabs trigger that you have selected. So then if I go through, I am not getting the correct styling being applied here. So what did I do wrong? Got the inactive state, we got the active state, tabs trigger. Maybe there's another issue. There we go. Okay, so it looked like, again, I had a little bit of a hang up. My styles were getting hung up in some way. If you wanted to create maybe a set of vertical tabs, you can easily just change the direction that your tabs render. So we'll change the direction with our display here and we'll set them vertical. We'll align them all to the left. And I would probably go through and maybe make each of these tabs triggers at least 100% width. And then on the root tabs, instead of this being a display block, I'll set this to a display flex, and we'll give it a little bit of a gap to give it some breathing room. And now I have a set of vertical tabs that I can click through and click through and keyboard navigate through too. If I had this in, I do have it in play mode. Yep. So tab over, and I can tab and switch with my keyboard to the next tabs. There's plenty of other different ways that tabs can be styled. You can take your tabs and keep going with how far you want to style these. I don't want to spend too much more time on all the different ways that tabs can be styled. If there are any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Leave a comment in this video if there's something in specific that you would like to style, and then we can create a new video or provide some documentation on how to do a certain example. So finally, I'd like to go through and discuss how you can work with the tabs to set tabs to work with the URL parameters. For this specific example, I am not going to use a board because we want to be able to have access to the URL bar. So I'm going to use the site for this specific example. So I am using one of the demonstrations from the overview, and we have a set of tabs on this listing page. And the idea is that I want to be able to share this with a friend of mine who might be looking for a new property. And maybe they're interested because they have pets, that I would like to be able to click this pet perks tab, and it provides some value up here, something like maybe tabs equals 2. And then when I go and share this with my friend, the second tab would be the tab that gets displayed. So with that set up, if we remember from the configuration, we talked about how there is a property of default value. We can tie this default value directly to the search params that comes from the navigation. So since there is a search param called tabs and that value is equal to 2, we can pass that right in. And when that page gets refreshed, the pet perks tab is going to be the one that gets displayed. Now that's working. What we want to do is make sure that we keep the tabs in sync with the URL at all times. And to do that, we'll add another property here called onValueChange. And this onValueChange needs an action. And so what we want to do is we want to, every single time that the value of the tabs changes, we want to perform a navigate action that just applies a query param to the current path. So I'm going to add a query param of tabs. And then the value of the query param is going to be the state value that comes from the onValueChange argument. So here, the onValueChange has some arguments of value. We'll apply that. And when I go and click on the individual tabs, what did I mess up here? undefined. Not sure why that's undefined. Oh, now it's working. Missed that. And with that value set, what we can do is we can go through and select our individual tabs, and our tabs will update the search params in the URL. And then that way, whenever we go and share this with somebody else, the page will always load to the selected tab that's present. So if somebody shares it and they want to go to tab 5 here, they click the 5th one and it will open up the sustainability tab here as seen. That about wraps it up on how to use the tabs from the Clutch Elements. You've learned how the tabs can be configured, that they're keyboard navigable. You've learned some of the properties there on how to change the navigation behavior. Working with keyboard navigation, you've also learned how to style the tabs using using the active and inactive states that are available to be styled, and also how to change the orientation of your tabs. We also went through and we talked about how to use tabs in this way to work with URL parameters to be able to share custom pages, listing pages, product pages, whatever it may be, with somebody else, and then have that tab be the active tab that was shared with them. If you have any questions about tabs specifically, if there's something else that you would like to know more, if something wasn't fully clear to you, please feel free to reach out to me or leave a comment down below, and we will be happy to provide any type of assistance or update on any questions that you ask us. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one.